Hi everyone. So we're going to go ahead and start chapter 19, which is going to continue on with the cardiovascular system. So we're going to be taking a look at one of the organs of the cardiovascular system, which is the heart. So the first thing that we're going to do in this video, we're going to introduce section 1. And section 1 is just going through and looking at just general functions of the cardiovascular system. And we touched on this a little bit in the blood chapter. And then we're going to be taking a look at the different types of blood vessels, and we're going to be taking a look at kind of just general structures of the heart, a little bit of the anatomy of the heart. And most of the anatomy you're going to get looking at your APR images and doing some of the lab simulation and things like that. So I go over just general anatomy in these videos, just so we can kind of get through the cardiac physiology that's going to be a little bit later. And then we're going to take a look at the difference between a pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. So let's go ahead and look at the general function of the cardiovascular system. So remember that the cardiovascular system, the two main organs are going to be the heart and the blood vessels. And we looked at the tissue, that special fluid connective tissue that flows through the cardiovascular system. And that was, of course, the blood. But the main function, the general function of the cardiovascular system is to transport blood through the body. So what it does is it delivers oxygen and nutrients to all of the body cells, and then, of course, it's going to remove CO2 and wastes. So the key thing here is that it's going to provide adequate perfusion. So let's take a look at this word perfusion and what it means. So in order for the cardiovascular system to be able to deliver oxygen and nutrients and remove the carbon dioxide and the waste, it has to be able to deliver blood at the right amount and the right amount of time. And that's basically what perfusion is. It's the delivery of blood per time per gram of tissues. So, and it's always given in milliliters per minute per gram. So this is just saying that we are getting the blood to these tissues at this amount of time, in this amount of time, and we're giving these tissues this amount of blood. You've got to make sure that you are giving them enough blood that they can, of course, maintain their cell respiration, maintain all of the work that they're doing in that tissue, but you're also having to make sure that you're getting it there on time as well. So of course, different tissues are going to have different perfusion rates as well. It really just depends on how much they are going to use. So adequate perfusion is going to be the sufficient delivery to maintain the cell's health. So that's going to make sure that the heart is continuously pumping, and that's also going to make sure, we also have to make sure that the blood vessels are healthy. You know, there's no unwanted clots, or there's nothing kind of building up in the vessel wall, but they also, and they need to be open as well. Or sometimes this word, you can see it as patent, and that can be another word that you might see to look to kind of describe this term for open in the human body is going to be patent. So before we get into the heart anatomy, let's just go ahead and take an overview look at the blood vessels. So these are going to be known as pipes in the cardiovascular system, and they put the term soft pipes because they don't want you thinking that there are these metal pipes that are going through the body. Of course, we know that they're made of this nice, simple squamous epithelium, and we'll get more into that when we get into the next chapter, when we actually look at blood vessels. So we're just going to introduce the main blood vessels here. They kind of show you over here as well. So arteries. Arteries are going to carry blood away from the heart. Usually it's oxygenated blood, but one thing that we're going to see is specifically here in the heart, because we're going to look at some of these great vessels that are attached to the heart. Not all of them are going to carry oxygenated blood, but most of them are going to carry oxygenated blood. So, however, whenever you talk about the definition, true definition of arteries, it's this. It is always going to carry blood away from the heart. And that brings us to veins. Veins are going to bring blood back to the heart. So most of the time it's deoxygenated blood, but not always. Just like this little, whenever you put that little asterisk beside words saying not always, but most of the time, not always, it's going to carry deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood. So again, we're going to be taking a look at this exception to the rule when we get into the heart. And we'll also take a look at it in fetal development as well. And then, of course, you have the tiny little things in between the veins and the arteries, and those are going to be the capillaries. And this is going to be where carbon dioxide and oxygen are going to be exchanged. So you have and also an exchange between the blood and air in the lungs as well. So you have a couple of places where you're having sites of exchange, where you're going in and exchanging gases and other substances as well. And this is something that we'll take a look at again in the next chapter. So that's just an overview of your blood vessels. So now let's take an overview look of the heart. We're just going to kind of introduce mainly the chambers. We're going to be taking a look at the great vessels. We're going to be taking a look at the valves as well. So remember that the heart is the center of the cardiovascular system. It's going to be this pump that is continually working to make sure that the blood is being pushed to where it needs to go. So there's going to be two sides. You're going to have the right side of the heart, and you're going to have this left side of the heart. It's four-chambered, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at, is going to be these chambers that is going to be found in the heart. So the upper chambers, or superior chambers, are going to be the atria. If you want to say one single atria, it's going to be atrium. That's a singular form of, if it lets me write my M, there it is. That's the singular form of atria. So if we, that's where it was right there written out for me already, but that's fine. What they do is they are actually going to receive blood. We'll talk about how it's receiving blood from the rest of the body, it's receiving it from the lungs, and then eventually it's going to send it to these next chambers, which is going to be the ventricles. These ventricles are going to be the bottom chambers of the heart, the inferior chambers. And what they're doing is they're pumping blood away. They're either sending it to the lungs, or they are going and sending it to the rest of the body. So this is going in and talking about the different sides. It's talking about how, specifically how the right atrium is going to be the one that receives deoxygenated blood from the body. And we'll go through blood flow later on to kind of show you guys what's happening. But it's going to receive deoxygenated blood from the body. The right ventricle, the right ventricle over here, the right ventricle is going in and it is going to pump deoxygenated blood, and it's going to go to the lungs that way. So that's all deoxygenated on that side. If we take a look at the left side, it is going to be this red color. So that's, anytime that you see this blue coloration in the book, it is referring to deoxygenated blood, even though, yeah, it's not the true color of deoxygenated blood, but we have to go in and kind of differentiate it with colors, and that's the best thing to do. On the left side, it has already gone to the lungs over here, and it's picked up oxygen. So now it's going to have oxygenated blood. The left atrium is going to receive oxygenated blood from the lungs, and then it is going to move to that left ventricle, and then this is the one that goes in and pumps oxygenated blood out to the rest of the body. And I can't really show where it's going because this is covering it up. But that's pretty much it for the chambers, basic function of the chambers, and we'll look at those a lot more later on, especially when we look at the whole cardiac cycle and exactly how everything is pumping. Now let's take a look at these big giant vessels that are going to be attached to that superior portion of the heart. These are called the great vessels, and they're ones that transport blood directly to and from the different chambers, and they are typically continuous with each chamber. So we are going to look at a couple of things a few, I guess, of the vessels that you guys are going to be looking at, especially when you get to APR. So here is the pulmonary trunk right here, And as you can see, part of it is taken off so we can see this valve, but this is going to be the pulmonary trunk. You'll be able to see it in better pictures in the book on what it actually looks like if we didn't have part of this heart taken off. From there, you're going to have these pulmonary arteries. Now, this isn't on your slide, the pulmonary arteries, mainly because of the fact that it's not attached directly to a chamber. It's not continuous with a chamber. Like the pulmonary trunk is going to be continuous with the chamber, but the trunk splits into these pulmonary arteries. And they're going to tell you exactly where they are going. Remember that arteries always carry blood away from the heart. And pulmonary, of course, means that is going to the lungs. And that, I mean, again, I always tell you guys to use these terminology, use their names to let them tell you what they are. Let's take a look at so there's the pulmonary trunk. Let's take a look at the aorta. The aorta is probably one that most people know. It is going to be this big, giant one right here. It's ascending, there's the arch, and then you have a descending portion as well. There's a superior and inferior vena cava. Inferior, you can see these a lot better on the posterior part of the heart. And again, we'll look at those a little bit later on. And then here's the superior. They are both, and that's the opening to that inferior. And they are both going to be continuous with that right atrium. And then you have the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins are tiny. And again, these are ones that you can see the posterior view. But there's the pulmonary veins, these tiny ones. And again, they're veins, so they're telling you that they are bringing blood to the heart and they are bringing it from the lungs. So again, we'll go through blood flow and everything like that later on. But here is this chart that kind of gives you a little bit more idea of the different pulmonary trunk and vena cava and aorta and pulmonary veins and exactly their functions. But once we get through blood flow, you'll know exactly what the functions are. It's about transporting blood and just knowing kind of where they're going and where they're coming from are some of the more important things to know about those. So now let's take a look at these things right here. This is the whole reason why this heart has been kind of cut open, not only to see, of course, the chambers, but also to see these little flaps right here. These are going to be heart valves. And your heart has two sets. And remember, since you have, of course, two sides of the heart, you are going to have 4 total. So 2 sets of valves. You have 2 AV valves or atrioventricular valves, and then you have 2 semilunar valves. So again, you have each of these, you have one right and left, and then on here you're going to have a right and a left, but they're going to be called something a little bit different. We're going to talk about how they're called different terms like the tricuspid and the bicuspid. What these do, the main function that they are going to do is going to ensure a one-way flow of blood through the heart. So let's take a look. There's the right AV valve because it's on the right side of the heart. AV means that it's in between the atrium and the ventricle. So this is also known as the tricuspid. And it's mainly because of how many cusps this thing has, or little flaps it has. But it's also known as the tricuspid. The way that you can remember that there's the T, the RI, it's on the right side, so that's how you can kind of remember the tricuspid valve. That's going to be on the right side. So again, ensures one-way blood flow through the heart. So this is just making sure that blood is going from the atrium to the ventricle. So that's the main function. And again, we'll look more into the valves later on. Let's take a look at the other AV valve. The left AV valve is also called the mitral. Whoops. So let's do bicuspid first. I always like to refer to it as bicuspid, especially because you have this one over here that's the tricuspid. Again, it has to do with how many of these little flaps there are. But also, it can be referred to as the mitral. It does not like me writing M's at all. The mitral valve as well. So those are going to be a couple of terms that, that can be used for the left AV valve. So anytime that you are talking about the different valves, the AV valves, please make sure you refer to them as either tricuspid or bicuspid or mitral. Let's take a look at the two semilunar valves. These are termed by their shape. So we'll talk about those later, but you're going to have this one called the pulmonary semilunar valve. This one is going to be right there at the pulmonary trunk. That's where it gets its name. Pretty clever, huh? And then you have this aortic semilunar valve, and it is going to be right where it gets its name because it is located at the very, very beginning of that aorta. And again, you can't see the rest of the aorta because it's covered up by this big giant pulmonary trunk, but that's where it's going to get its name. So let's take a look at the different circulation routes that's going to be found, mainly kind of looking at the blood vessels in the heart, but we'll take a look at other mechanics that are going on as well. You know, we've been kind of looking at with the heart and the blood vessels, we've been taking a look at how you have one side that's going to be blue that's depicting deoxygenated blood, and the other side that's going to be colored red that's depicting oxygenated blood. And that's going to refer to this pulmonary and systemic circulation. So if we take a look at, if we think of what the pulmonary circulation is, this is kind of telling you what it has to do with. It has to do with the lungs. So it has to do with the blood, the deoxygenated blood that's going to go into the right side of the heart, and it's going to eventually work its way over to the lungs to pick up oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, and then it's going to bring it back to the heart that way. So anytime that you see that pulmonary circulation, it's going to have to deal with deoxygenated blood, right side of the heart, going to the lungs, and doing its gas exchange over there. Now, if we take a look at what the systemic circulation is, this is more about getting that oxygenated blood that we just picked up. We just picked up that oxygen over here in the lungs. So now we need to do, now that it's over here on the left side of the heart, we need to get it to all of the different body cells. So systemic circulation really does have to do with all of the body tissues and all the body cells, or they have it here termed as systemic cells. And this is going to be where we kind of do the opposite of what's over here. We are going to push out the oxygen and give it to the cells, and we're going to pick up carbon dioxide and get it into the bloodstream that way. So it can come right back to the heart, and we can go through that whole mechanism once again. So this kind of goes through and sums up the whole pulmonary and systemic circulation. Now this is something that we'll go through later on. This is what I was talking about, how we are going to get into blood flow, and we're going to go through and talk about the chambers, what the blood, which valves it passes through, which great vessels it passes through, and the organs that it's going to. So there's a nice little I guess the verbiage here, all of the words, but we'll kind of go through a flow chart. You know, if this works for you as far as understanding blood flow through the heart, then great, but there will be another video that kind of goes through the whole blood flow. It's really, really important to make sure that you get down these different chambers, vessels, and valves and blood flow. And if you can kind of get that and understand the flow of everything, then it really does help a lot once we go into like the cardiac cycle and things like that. It helps a lot to understand this whole anatomy and what's going on as far as blood flow. So please make sure that you get that down before we get into the future sections. So until next time.